Hi everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen who had no children. They were very sad about it and wished every day for a baby. After many years, their wish finally came true. The queen gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The whole kingdom celebrated, and the king and queen were filled with joy. A grand christening was arranged for the little princess, and the king and queen wanted the best blessings for their daughter. So, they invited 7 fairies to be her godmothers. In those days, fairies would give special gifts, and these 7 fairies promised to bless the princess with all the wonderful qualities anyone could ever have. After the christening, a great feast was held in the palace. Each fairy godmother received a beautiful gold case, inside which were a spoon, a knife, and a fork, all made of gold and decorated with diamonds and rubies. But just as everyone was about to sit down and enjoy the feast, something unexpected happened. A very old fairy, whom nobody had seen for over 50 years, entered the hall. She had not been invited because everyone thought she was either dead or lost in an enchanted spell. Since the king had prepared only 7 gold cases, there was none left for her. The old fairy felt insulted. Her eyes darkened with anger, and she muttered something under her breath. One of the younger fairies, sitting nearby, overheard her whispers and realized she might cast a bad spell on the princess. Thinking quickly, the young fairy hid behind a curtain, ready to undo any harm the old fairy might cause. The fairies then began giving their blessings. One by one, they gifted the princess with beauty, intelligence, grace, and talent. She would dance perfectly, sing like a nightingale, and play music like no other. Then, it was the old fairy's turn. Her face was filled with bitterness as she spoke. One day, the princess will prick her hand on the needle of a spinning wheel. And she will die. A silence fell over the hall. The king, the queen, and all the guests were frozen in horror. Tears filled their eyes as they looked at their innocent little baby. At that very moment, the young fairy stepped out from behind the curtain. "Do not fear, your majesties," she said. "I cannot undo the curse completely, but I can change it. The princess will indeed prick her hand on a spinning wheel, but she will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep. For 100 years. And at the end of that time, a prince will come and wake her." Hearing this, the king immediately passed a law: all spinning wheels were to be destroyed. No one in the kingdom was allowed to own or use one. Years passed, and the princess grew into a kind and beautiful young woman. One day, when she was about 15 or 16 years old, she was exploring the palace while her parents were busy. She wandered up a long, winding staircase and found herself in a small room at the top of a tower. Inside, an old woman sat spinning wool into thread. The princess had never seen a spinning wheel before. "What are you doing, good lady?" she asked. "I'm spinning wool into thread, dear child," the woman replied. "That looks so interesting," said the princess. "Let me try." The moment she touched the spinning wheel, she pricked her finger on the sharp needle. Instantly, she collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. The old woman cried out in shock. Servants rushed into the room, followed by the king and queen. They tried everything, sprinkling water on her face, loosening her clothes, rubbing her hands, but nothing worked. She was in a deep, deep sleep. The king remembered the fairy's prophecy and knew there was nothing they could do. With a heavy heart, he ordered that the princess be placed on a grand bed covered in gold and silver embroidery. Just then, the kind young fairy, who had softened the old fairy's curse, heard the news. She was in a kingdom far away but quickly returned, traveling in a magical chariot pulled by dragons. When she arrived, she saw the sleeping princess and realized something important. If the princess wakes up in 100 years, she will feel lost and alone in an empty palace, she thought. So, she cast another spell. With a wave of her wand, she put everyone in the palace to sleep: the king, the queen, The servants, the cooks, the guards, even the animals. Everything in the palace, from the fires in the kitchen to the birds in the gardens, fell into a deep slumber. Then, suddenly, thick vines, thorny bushes, and tall trees grew around the palace, hiding it completely from the outside world. No one could enter or leave. For 100 years, the palace remained hidden, forgotten by the world. One day, a young prince from another kingdom was hunting in the forest when he spotted the tops of the palace towers through the thick trees. Curious, he asked an old villager about it. The old man said, 50 years ago, my grandfather told me a story of a beautiful princess cursed to sleep for 100 years. They say only a prince can wake her. The prince's heart raced. Could he be the one to save her? Filled with excitement, he rode toward the mysterious forest. As soon as he reached the edge, the trees and vines magically parted to let him through. He walked into the silent palace, past sleeping guards, still holding their weapons. The air was still, the grand halls untouched by time. Finally, he reached a golden chamber and saw the sleeping princess. She was breathtakingly beautiful, her cheeks soft and rosy, as if she were simply resting. With great admiration, he knelt beside her and gently kissed her hand. At that moment, the curse lifted. The princess's eyes fluttered open. She looked at the prince and smiled. "Is it you, my prince? I have waited for so long." The prince, overcome with joy, took her hands in his. "I love you more than anything in this world," he said. Just then, the entire palace woke up. The king and queen, the servants, and even the little dog all stretched and yawned as if they had simply taken a long nap. The cooks rushed to the kitchen to prepare a grand feast, and the musicians began to play joyful tunes. That very evening, the prince and the princess were married in the palace chapel. They danced, laughed, and celebrated their love, as if no time had passed at all, and so, the princess, who had slept for 100 years, finally found her happily ever after.